Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Political hitman. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman here on Israel News Talk Radio. Picture this. You're in the synagogue. It is Yom Kippur. And you're getting to the end of Yom Kippur. You're coming right near the end of the prayer service. And suddenly the door bursts open and a bunch of police officers come running in. They say, "Stop what you're doing! Stop!" Everybody has to leave right now. Sounds like a scene out of communist Russia or Nazi Germany, doesn't it? But it happened. It happened this Yom Kippur in many synagogues across North America. Synagogues that chose to have services that didn't comply with the rulings for COVID-19. Many different synagogues, many different areas of North America have set rules for synagogues and the amount of people they're allowed to have in their institutions for prayer services. And those that didn't comply were raided by the police. I want to talk about this because a lot of different stuff has happened since the raiding of synagogues on Yom Kippur. A lot of different things have happened, including the governor of New York demanding that synagogues comply or face the consequences. We've been talking about Judaism in North America for quite a few years already, and how Judaism in North America is coming to an end. And I think we're starting to see the beginnings of that. I think we are. And I want to talk about that and a whole lot of other things here on Political Hitman. You could join me in the chat room, by the way, at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. We are a live show, which means that you could call in. The numbers to call in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, 02-650-0151. Is North America rapidly becoming a crazy anti-Jewish state? Stay tuned. This is Political Hitman. I'm Howie Silberger.
Always challenging the status quo. Hello, I'm Rod Bryant on Beyond the Matrix here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to encourage you to listen each week, every Wednesday at the same time, for an amazing show that will challenge you, inform you, and inspire. News, views, and wisdom for the nations here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Don't forget, Beyond the Matrix every week, Wednesday, here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Political hitman. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Imagine being in synagogue and suddenly the police barge in and say everybody has to leave. You are breaking the rules, the COVID rules, everybody must go. This happened in synagogues across North America. Now, I'm not advocating that synagogues break COVID rules. I think following the COVID rules is important, and I think that that for public health reasons, we should not be flaunting the rules. I don't think religious people have any special dispensation to flaunt the rules, much like anybody else. If we have a certain amount of people are allowed coming to services, if you have a certain regulation about mask wearing and social distancing, then that's really what should be happening. And there should be no debate about that. So let me get that off bat. Let me get that very clear and out there very clearly, that there should be absolutely no debate about following public health protocols when it comes to saving lives. Our main goal, our main focus should be the preservation of life, period. There should be no other debate. The preservation of life is the focus and the main goal. End of story. Not even a debate about it. So if limiting the amount of people at your service, if wearing a mask, if social distancing will save lives, then that there should be not even a question that that's what we do. So that said, it is very disconcerting when police officers come barging into synagogues. It's very off-putting, especially for the Jewish community that experienced pogroms, that experienced Nazism, that experience of having people barge into our prayer services is not a pleasant experience and doesn't bring back good memories at all. So the idea that police would barge into a Yom Kippur service or multiple Yom Kippur services and remove people from a synagogue brings back pretty horrific memories from Jews who are aware of their history. And this is the issue I have with this kind of behavior from the police and from the government. Yesterday, Mario Cuomo, the governor of New York City, sent a special warning to Orthodox synagogues, telling the Jews of Orthodox synagogues that you better comply with COVID regulations or we're going to shut down your synagogues. As if going to Walmart, going to the supermarkets, or going shopping in any store, in any shopping mall across North America is more dangerous than going to the synagogue. Yet that seems to be okay. That seems to be permissible. But prayer service is not, and it's just worrisome and bothering me. It bothers me not because I think that the synagogues, as I said, I don't think the synagogues should be flaunting the rules, and some of them are definitely flaunting the rules, and that's totally unacceptable. What bothers me is that if the police have an issue with the amount of people in a synagogue or an issue with the way a synagogue is being run, then the police should deal with the administration of the synagogue. There should be somebody appointed in the synagogue to deal with the police, and then the synagogue should deal with the issue. Sending the troops into a religious service, it just optically is wrong and sends the wrong, really brings back the wrong memories to the Jewish community. So I get upset when I see synagogues being taken over by military, by police, by force. This bothers me. It bothers me to my core. Now, what else? Another thing that bothers me to my core. So, I mean, I'm of two heads of this because I believe that the police should be enforcing the COVID restrictions. I believe that the police should be watching out for our health and for the safety of the community. And but the people who are flaunting the rules, the people who are ignoring the rules, the people who have no concern for other people aside from themselves, those people hurt me to my core too. So you see, there's two sides to the story, and both sides are hurtful. So a middle ground has to be found, and the middle ground is that look, it's a deadly disease. People are dying from it. And disproportionately, well, I wouldn't say disproportionately, but there's a large proportion of the Jewish community right across the world that is dying from this disease. We have to protect ourselves, and we have to protect our people. And so if we're protecting ourselves and our people, then we should be following the health recommendations. It seems logical to me, but somehow people seem to think differently. So while I don't think the police should be barging into synagogues, I definitely don't think that synagogues should be provoking the police or should be shunning the regulations. Okay, so that's it. Now, we have police barging into synagogues. We have a governor of a U.S. state, a big U.S. state, saying that he's going to close down the synagogues, and we have synagogues themselves that are shutting themselves down, and bowing to the pressure of the government. I know firsthand that there were synagogues that were trying to negotiate with the government for the high holidays to allow maybe 100 or 200 people into the synagogue during the high holidays. I know this firsthand. And I know that the government balked at it, saying, hey, listen, we have to protect society. So where does religion end? where does religious responsibility come in, and where does governmental responsibility come in, and police enforcement? Where does this all come together? How could this all work as a synergic unit, a unit of synergy? How could this all work together so that we could have a safe environment to pray in, also have a safe environment to live in, and make the government, the religion, the government, and the people happy? How is this possible? Is this possible at all? And that's the question I have for you. So join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. You could call in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 02-650-0151. You could join me on the air right here on Israel News Talk Radio. And I'd love to hear what you have to say. Look, the experience, the high holiday experience, and the holiday season experience, the Jewish experience, has been very different for me. I have not been able to go to synagogue at all, like millions of other Jews. I haven't been able to go to synagogue at all. I've been spending most of the holidays by myself or with one other person, and it's not the same as it was. I mean, I used to go to synagogue on a regular basis. I haven't been able to do that anymore, and I'm wondering, how has your experience been? Has it been the same? I know Israel's in lockdown right now. A lot of North American cities are in lockdown. People are alone. People are lonely, especially holidays. People are lonely. We are now in the holiday of Sukkot. I built the sukkah. I'm eating in the sukkah, and I'm using the sukkah. But I know many people didn't even have a chance to build their sukkah this year. They didn't have a chance to go and eat in the sukkah. It is a scary situation. When you think about it, it's a scary situation. People are dying from this disease. And we have the holidays. We try to keep the holidays as light and as enjoyable as possible, especially for the children. We have to watch out for the children and their mental health. So we try to keep it as enjoyable as possible. But at the same time, the fear is always there. It's palpable, and it's existent. It's palpable. It's there. So how do we break through the fear? How do we walk back the fear and start living life as normally as possible, while still taking care of not spreading this disease and not trying to get other people sick? This is the dilemma that a lot of communities are going through right now. Now, Donald Trump, the president of the United States, made a statement yesterday saying that he thinks that we shouldn't live our lives in fear. I mean, the disease is there. Anybody could get it. He got it. Anybody could get it. And we shouldn't live life in fear. We should try to live life as fully as we can. And I agree with that sentiment. But how do we do it? How do you do it when the police are cracking down on you? How do you do it when the governor of your state is threatening to shut your synagogue down? How do you do it when the police are barging into Yom Kippur services? How do you do it at all? It's the question I have for you. It's the question that everybody has. We're all wondering the same thing, and we all have to be disturbed and concerned and scared and not scared all at the same time. We have crazy rules where people stay home and then but the schools have to be open. So a teacher could be standing in line at a grocery store and only allow 3 people into a grocery store, but the teacher could have spent the whole day talking to hundreds of kids in the school in different groups. The rules don't even make sense. So you're trying to legitimize this whole process. You're trying to make sense of the rules. They don't make sense. And then you're trying to make sense of the government crackdown and the threats. The pressure is immense on the Jewish community. Now, I'm only talking about the Jewish community. I know the pressure is immense on everyone, but the Jewish community, the pressure is immense, especially in the middle of the holiday season. I don't envy the people who are responsible for Jewish communities and people who have to deal with this on a communal level. It is a truly unique situation we are living in. Now, I have a few suggestions on what we could do, and I'll get to them after the break. I think that there is ways that we could live peacefully and in harmony with the rules and still enjoy ourselves and still have a good time. And I think that we have to start looking at alternate ways to do things, including prayer, including religious study. There has to be ultimate ways to do things, and we have to start looking at that. I'm Howie Silver. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Modesty at the beach? It isn't just about body image, it's about feeling good. Modest swimsuits, so we don't get burned by the sun.
So we won't get ogled by strangers.
So we'll feel free to express ourselves without the need to expose ourselves.
Let Marcy Modest help you to cover up what you want, how you want.
Made in Israel.
Visit marcymodest.com. That's MARSEA modest.com.
And get a 10% discount on your first purchase.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. You could feel free to join me in the chat room by going to IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, clicking on that button that says Listen Live Chat Room, and we're right there in the chat room. The conversation has already started in the chat room. It's always interesting, so feel free to jump over to the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. You could always call in. I mean, it's always nice to talk to you. Numbers to call in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265-00151, IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. So we're living in the time of COVID. We are living in the time where we are experiencing far greater Jew hatred. And I'll say that straight out. Now, I don't like saying Jew hatred. I don't like using that term, but we're starting to see it crop up a lot around the world. I don't like calling everything Jew hatred. In fact, let me tell you a short story right now because it kind of fits into this topic. There was a synagogue that was raided in a North American city. And just after the synagogue was raided, it was raided on Yom Kippur when a lot of synagogues in North America were raided. I know of at least 6 or 7 that were raided in North America during Yom Kippur. This particular synagogue was raided just before the end of the Yom Kippur service. And the police came in and they gathered everybody else and they pushed them out onto the street. And then with their police cars, they pushed them away and they made them go home. So this happened. After Yom Kippur, a video went out, and the video went viral. Hundreds of thousands of people saw the video, where the person on the video claimed that the synagogue was following the rules and the police were being anti-Jewish by going in and emptying a synagogue filled with Jews praying for Yom Kippur. Anti-Jewish. And he repeated that the police were blatantly anti-Jewish, and this was an anti-Jewish act. He contacted me, and he says to me, Howie, I want to be on your show. And I said, all right, I could put you on the show. I mean, it's easy for me to put the guest on the show. I said, but before I put you on the show, I have to check and verify your story. I'm just not going to throw you on the radio to talk to thousands and thousands of people and not verify that your story is true. So he said, you could verify anything you want. The story is true, and I am coming onto your show. We're going to talk about the story and the anti-Jewish attitude of the police and how the police are picking on the Jewish community. I said, okay. So I started looking into the guy's story. And I made a phone call, and then I made another phone call, and I made a third phone call. And the story that I got was radically different than the story that was told in the viral video. Radically different. So the rules of the game were very clear at the beginning of the holiday, that the synagogues were only allowed to have 25 people in the service, and that's that the area that had the 25 people had to be segregated from all other areas and had to have its own entrance and exit. That was the rules of the city that he was in. And so what his synagogue decided to do was decided to take their large area, their sanctuary, and put curtains up and put 25 people in each section of their curtains, which was theoretically following the rules, but the areas didn't have their own entrances and exits, and that was the issue. And so they were playing games in order to get more people into their synagogue. So when you're violating the rules and the police come and break you up, I'm not going to have as much empathy as if you were trying to follow the rules and they broke you up like that. So so this is why I'm saying that, calling it anti-Jewish and saying that there was an anti-Jewish message in the police coming to break up Yom Kippur services that were violating COVID regulations doesn't really play well in my head, because I think it's like the boy who cried wolf. If you yell anti-Jewish too many times, you are going to find that when things are actually anti-Jewish, people aren't going to take you seriously. You overuse the word, you dilute the word. You dilute the word, and then the word has no impact anymore. So it's like calling someone a racist today. The left has used the word racist so many times on so many false levels and so many stupid levels that calling someone a racist now is not really that big of an insult. Where if you would have called somebody a racist 10 years ago or 15 years ago, that would have been a huge insult and damaging to the person's reputation. Today, it's just a tactic. They weaponize the word, so the word becomes a tactic. I found that the Jewish community over the years had weaponized the word anti-Semitism. They weaponized the word. And everything that happened, and anytime anything happened that was remotely negative towards the Jewish community, or if the Jewish community did something and the reaction was negative towards the Jewish community, the immediate word that came out of everyone's mouth was anti-Semite. You're anti-Semite. It's anti-Semitism. And this actually diluted the word to a point where the word has no meaning anymore. Calling someone an anti-Semite today doesn't mean anything anymore, which is why I instituted on my show, we don't use those words. We don't use the word anti-Semite, it's Jew hater. So if I'm talking about somebody who hates Jews, I'm going to use the direct term called Jew hater. And so that's the term I use on the show, because the other words were already diluted. Jew hater is pretty clear. If you're a Jew hater, you hate Jews. And that's a pretty clear statement to make. And so I will use the word Jew hater rather than the word anti-Semite, because the word anti-Semite has been diluted over the years. It's been killed. They've burned the word. So that said, if you're violating the rules and the police come in and break you, then the police come in and break up your quorum and you break up your synagogue, that's acceptable. If you're not violating the rules and the police come in and break up your synagogue, that's not acceptable. If you are in New York City and the governor is specifically picking on the Jewish community, that is unacceptable. And that's what's happening in New York City now. The governor is, again, for the second time since COVID started, picking on the Jewish community. It's funny because the governor, his focus on the Jewish community is really, I say, suspect. And the reason I say that, and bear with me, the reason I say that, the governor and the mayor of New York have not been very good to the Jewish community. We talked about it on this show for weeks and weeks and weeks. We talked about the idea of the government of New York, both the governor and the mayor, abandoning the Jewish community. We saw open attacks on Jews last summer, not this past, a year ago. We saw open attacks on Jews all year that were not taken care of by the government of New York City. So when the government comes and says to the Jewish community, either comply or we are shutting down your synagogues, something we should be concerned about. New York City has the highest population per capita of Jews outside of Israel. There are more Jews living in New York City than anywhere else in Israel, anywhere else in North America. So we got to be a little concerned about the Jews of New York City. Now, I know a lot of people were concerned when they were being attacked in the streets. We know a lot of people were being concerned when the New York Police Department did nothing to stop the attacks. When the mayor of New York ignored the fact that Jews were being attacked in the streets. And now that the governor is threatening to shut down synagogues in New York, there should be outrage. But unfortunately, the Jewish community doesn't do that. They just don't get outraged. And I for the life of me, I can't figure out why. And I've been trying to figure this out for a long time, but the Jews of the world do not get outraged. They get saddened. I mean, you see the Jewish organizations always putting out these statements saying, we are saddened by the events that happen. We're not outraged. We're saddened. I'm not saddened. I'm never saddened. I'm outraged that the Jewish community has been fingered, pointed out, has been spotlighted by the governor of New York. There are other religions, there are other people who are breaking the laws just as badly as the Orthodox Jews are breaking the laws. I am outraged by this. And you should be outraged too. You should be outraged that there are Jewish communities that are breaking the laws. Yes, we should be outraged by that. We should not be breaking the laws. We should be following the laws of the lands we live in. And we should be following public health protocols because, heck, we don't want more people to die. But you should also be outraged that the government of New York felt it appropriate to put up pictures during a press conference of Hasidic Jews praying and pointing a finger at Hasidic Jews, saying that these are the people who are spreading COVID. It's untrue, it's a lie, and it's an anti-Jewish lie. And it should be unacceptable to you, to me, and to everybody else. Anybody who cares about social justice, anybody who cares about the spreading of hatred around the world, anybody who jumped up, all these Jews who were yelling and screaming and raising money for Black Lives Matter should be screaming about this too. This is totally unacceptable, anti-Jewish behavior from a government, an elected government. And that is scary because when that starts happening, it's a slippery slope. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Those of you who listen to the show know I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But I am a historian and I believe in history. And I believe that we must remember history. And we must remember that when governments start picking on a religion, on a identifiable religion, and start pointing fingers and scapegoating a religion, it is not a far cry from either deporting that religion, jailing that religion, or murdering that religion. Not a far skip and a jump at all. We've got to remember history. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman. Give me a call. Numbers are on the top of the page on Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Political hitman. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to call in North America 301-768-4841, in Israel 02-6500151. You could join me in the chat room at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, where the conversation is always going in the chat room, and I will be there till the end of the show. So feel free to join us in the chat room at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. So just before the break, I was saying, look, I don't lay down for anybody. I'm the kind of guy who will stand up for my rights and not back down ever. I don't back down, and I've been like this since I'm a kid, and I guess I'll be like this till I die. And I don't believe that the Jewish community should ever back down. At the same time, I also believe that the Jewish community should be socially responsible, and that we should be shedding a light, a positive light, upon the nations. And this is really the mission of the Jews, is to shed a positive light upon the nations. And by defying the laws of the lands we live in, and the rabbis have said over and over again that we must obey the laws of the lands we live in, but by defying the laws of the lands we live in, we are not shedding that light. And so the Jewish communities who are not abiding by the laws and the rules of the lands we live in are not shedding a nice light to the nations. They're not shedding a proper light to the nations. And that is unacceptable too. But the outrage that I feel is not specifically towards the Jewish community, although I'm outraged that part of the community is refusing to follow the proper guidelines and keep us safe. Because as you know, and I know, one of the core bases, one of the core principles of Judaism is the preservation of life. And if we are putting in any way, God forbid, putting the lives of anybody in danger, then that is totally unacceptable and totally against Judaism. And in fact, Judaism dictates that we have to sacrifice anything to preserve life. So those who are not obeying the COVID guidelines, those of us who are doing things intentionally that may put lives in jeopardy are actually violating Jewish law, and that's unacceptable and should not be done. But putting that aside, the fact that there is a governor in the United States of America right now who is scapegoating and advocating the closing of synagogues and scapegoating the Jewish community, blaming them for the spread of COVID and only them for the spread of COVID. This is a modern-day blood libel. We are living through a modern-day blood libel. This is no different than European leaders saying that Jews use the blood of Christian children to make matzahs. It is no different than the centuries of the protocols of the elders of Zion. It is no different than the 1400s. Then in the 1400s, when Jews were relegated to be money traders and then accused of controlling the economy. By the way, a blood libel that still exists till today. This is no different than any of those. And anybody who argues that it is different than that is deluded and deluding themselves. They're hiding in their assimilation, saying, oh, we can't say that. We must not say that. And I get this all the time. By the way, I get emails all the time telling me, Howie, how could you say it on the radio? Well, you're darn right I'm going to say it on the radio. Governor Cuomo Andrew Cuomo, is committing a blood libel against the Jewish community. And it is an unacceptable blood libel. And it must be condemned universally. And Jews must be outraged by this. We must be outraged. But so far, I haven't heard any Jewish leaders getting up and condemning the governor. So far, I haven't heard any Jewish leaders, and I use the term leaders in North American Jewry very loosely. I haven't heard any North American Jewish leaders getting up and saying this is unacceptable behavior, unacceptable talk. I've seen them bow and kiss the ring of the emperor. That's what I've seen them do. And that's all I've seen them do. And that is unacceptable. In my book, that is unacceptable. We cannot allow governors or any elected officials, any government officials, or anybody actually, to spread lies against the Jewish community. We can't accept it. Now, the problem with this, by the way, and I'll be honest with you, because I'm always honest with you. This is political hitman, and I just lay it out there. The problem is that there is a contingent of Jewish people who agree with the governor, because their hatred towards the religious Jews are even worse than the governor's hatred towards religious Jews. And that is the tragedy of the North American Jewish experience. That Jews in North America, much like the Jews in Germany before the Holocaust, have embraced assimilation to a point where they're even willing to turn on their own people. This is where we're at today in North American Jewry. So when I yell and I scream and I say that North American Jewry is done, is finished, does not exist anymore, there are pockets of Jews living in North America, but the Jewish community as a community in North America, even amongst the modern Orthodox and the Orthodox, doesn't exist. This is what I'm talking about. That there are Jews willing to stab other Jews in the back and agree with a blood libel and use it and post it over and over again on Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram. Post this blood libel and say, yes, the governor is right. It's the Orthodox Jews that are spreading COVID. That there are Jews willing to do that means that we are living in a cesspool. There is nothing left. There's no more dignity. There's no more honor in the so-called organized Jewish communities. And the fact that the organized Jewish communities, that the federations of North America haven't come out and started screaming and yelling about this blood libel that the governor of New York is spreading against the Jewish community is shameful. Absolutely shameful. The Anti-Defamation League, shameful. We cannot, as a community, survive. As a worldwide Jewish community, we cannot survive if blood libels are allowed to take place. Because when people believe blood libels, and when the government says it and they use a press conference to scapegoat the Jewish community, and the Jewish community accepts it, and the non-Jewish community accepts it, then the scapegoating will continue, and we're going to start seeing attacks on Jews again. Once again, putting the lives of Jews in danger. This is not acceptable. This should never be acceptable by anybody. Jewish or non-Jewish, we should be outraged. Do some of the Hasidic communities flaunt the rules of COVID? Yes, they do. Do you want to fix that problem? Speak to their rebbes. Speak to the rabbis. The rabbis could fix the problems. That is what they do. They run their communities. The rabbi says put on a mask, the community is going to put on the mask. You want to fix those communities, you speak to the rabbis. You don't scapegoat them at a government press conference. You don't point fingers at them and say these are the people responsible. Because when you do that, the wackos come out to play. The wackos come out and say, if the government's not going to control those Jews, then we'll control those Jews. And then you get the wackos in the streets, beating up Jews in the middle of the street. We saw it happen. It's not a foreign concept. You saw it happen when the government of New York, once again, New York City again, when the government of New York City did nothing to stop the Crown Heights riots in the early 90s. We saw it happen. A pogrom, a modern-day pogrom against the Jewish community where one man, Yankel Rosenbaum, a yeshiva student, a 19-year-old yeshiva student, was killed. He was murdered in the street. That's what happens when you scapegoat the community. The nutcases come out and attack the community. And allowing that to happen is completely unacceptable. If somebody gets hurt, if somebody, God forbid, gets killed, then the Jewish community that said nothing, the people who sat on their hands and said and did nothing, those people will have the blood on their hands. They will be as responsible for the murder or for the violence as the people perpetrating it. Governor Cuomo has to be condemned from coast to coast. Governor Cuomo has to be held accountable for the blood libel that he is spreading against the Jewish community. Failing to do that, failing to point it out, failing to yell it and hold him accountable for it, the Jewish community's leadership, and I'll use that in air quotes, is failing their community. What do you expect from a community that chooses their leaders based on how much donations they give to their local federation? There's no leadership there. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. I want to thank you so much for listening. I do appreciate you tuning in. Our hour is just about up. I want to tell you I'll be back again next week right here on Israel News Talk Radio. I want to thank you, and I wish you a good week. We'll see you next week.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.